Thank you. Here to talk more about the war, Dan Perry, a former Europe, Africa, and Middle East editor for the Associated Press, who is also joining us live from Tel Aviv. Sir, thank you for your time. Tell me about your experience in Tel Aviv over the last 24 hours.
Well, just as Robert was saying, I mean, it's sirens all the time, explosions overhead, debris occasionally falling on streets nearby where I live, and the family huddled together in a stairwell and rather agitated. But there is a tremendous sense of agony across Israeli society, where almost everyone knows someone somehow affected by all this, whether killed, injured, or abducted. There is a sense of tremendous foreboding because, of course, there is likely to be action in Gaza. There may be contagion in the north with Hezbollah. There may be action in West Bank if the Palestinians choose to stage an uprising as part of all this. At the same time, I think there is an understanding in Israel that Hamas is not the Palestinians, Hamas is not the Gazans. Hamas is a barbaric terrorist group that Israel probably was unwise in acquiescing to its rule in Gaza. There was a notion that Israel could contain them in Gaza, and it was somehow acceptable because, as Robert says, Iron Dome more or less zaps these rockets out of the sky. That's no longer tenable. That was proven to be a catastrophic miscalculation by the right-wing government that preferred Hamas in Gaza because it had the effect of weakening the Palestinian Authority in West Bank. There was a convergence of interest here because Saudi Arabia looked to be about to do a deal with Israel that would not require any action on a Palestinian issue. That would have created an American, Israeli, Saudi security strategic alliance that the Iranians didn't want. And that would have made many Palestinians think they were sold down a river. So the confluence of interests between radical Palestinians and Iran may be the story.
Yeah, the timing of that not lost on anyone who follows this closely. Dan, how does the fact that Hamas has hostages right now impact Israel's strategic defenses and their response in the next few days?
You know, I'm not telepathic, and some of the extremist Israeli ministers have come out and said it doesn't, and we're going to go about our business as if there were no hostages. I'm not sure I believe that. And indeed, one should never believe anything spoken by people at war because there's going to be smoke screens and smoke and mirrors. But so great is the shock at what happened here. So unprecedented is this event that relative to population amounts to like 4 or 5 9/11s for the U.S. And it is worse than what happened in '73 because you did not have, the Egyptian army wasn't really going to enter Israel and they weren't really targeting civilians. This is different. It's unprecedented. It's the largest, most deadly day for Jews other than natural deaths, I believe, since the Holocaust. It's a game changer. And under normal circumstances, given that the conception about containing Hamas in Gaza, and it's almost okay that a maniacal terrorist group is in charge of that territory, has collapsed, by now you would have had tanks rolling in. And an attempt to retake Gaza, hand it back to the Palestinian Authority, change the entire paradigm. Because that is a mindset here. The crossing of a Rubicon and that things must change. The reason why that is not happening yet, I believe, is mostly because of uncertainty about what that would do to the fate of the hostages. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean they'd be executed tomorrow because they're very valuable to Hamas as regards what is one of its main goals, which is trading them for Hamas prisoners in Israel.
There will be a reckoning for Netanyahu.
I should think so. I mean, the series of mistakes that he has blundered into and the calamitous 10 months of his premiership should be tough to bounce back from. But then again, he's a political Houdini and he knows how to frame a narrative, and I would never, ever count him out. But so clearly is the blame going to be directed at the government. So obvious is their failure to protect Gaza and to prefer the West Bank, where their own radicals have fomented the crisis that they now have to deal with militarily there. So inexplicably reckless was their effort to turn Israel into an authoritarian country and a fake democracy with this nonsensical talk of judicial reform. It's not about judicial system, and it wasn't a reform. There's going to be an accounting, but there's also a sense in Israel that this is not the time for that accounting, and that it's a time for consolidation and unity and of dealing with a national crisis that renders a little ridiculous the internal squabbles. And I think if Hamas was tempted to take this potentially suicidal action, and certainly murderous action, because they thought Israel's weak, well, that's on Netanyahu that they were tempted that way. But it's a terrible mistake on their part, because you see it already, and your reporter will confirm, despite what happened in Israel during the past 10 months, the resilience of society has not been broken, and they have a way of unifying when they must. And I think we're going to see that now.
Dan Perry, thank you for your time. Be safe.